We're so good at taking care of our bodies, right? We brush our teeth, we see doctors, we slap a band-aid on a cut. But what about our minds? In this explainer, we're going to dive into why our psychological health deserves the exact same level of care. Just think about this for a second. We teach 5-year-olds how to handle a paper cut, but what tools do we give them, or let's be honest, ourselves, for emotional injuries like rejection, loneliness, or failure? And that gap, it has huge consequences. All right, first up, the body's favorite child. We're going to dig into this really strange imbalance in how we value our physical health way more than our mental health. So, psychologist Guy Winch, he knows a thing or two about favoritism. As an identical twin, he says even the tiniest difference in cookie size was, a major investigation. And that childhood skill led him to spot a much, much bigger favoritism in our society. The way we prize our bodies over our minds. Just picture this. A 5-year-old falls and scrapes their knee. They know exactly what to do. Get a Band-Aid. We've all understood basic physical and dental hygiene since we were kids, but when it comes to psychological hygiene, we teach our kids, well, pretty much nothing. And here's the thing, we get psychological wounds all the time, way more often than we get physical ones. And just like a real injury, if you ignore something like loneliness or failure, it can get so much worse and really start to mess with your life. And yet, what's our typical response? It's something like this, right? Can you imagine saying this to someone with a broken leg? Just walk it off. It's all in your leg. No way. It sounds completely absurd. It is time we close this gap and start treating our minds and our bodies like the equals they are. Okay, section 2. Invisible wounds, real dangers. Because ignoring these kinds of injuries isn't just a bad idea, it's actually dangerous. Let's kick things off with one of the most common psychological wounds out there, loneliness, and see how it can totally warp our perception of reality. Now, the first thing to get is that loneliness isn't about being by yourself. It's a feeling, right? It's subjective. That feeling of being disconnected. Winch actually felt this firsthand when he moved to New York for his doctorate. It was the first time he'd ever been separated from his twin, and on their birthday, he's waiting for his brother's call and it never comes. His lonely mind immediately jumped to he doesn't care anymore, when in reality, his brother had just accidentally kicked the phone off the hook. And that kind of warped thinking, that's just the beginning. The physical toll is staggering. Chronic loneliness increases your chances of an early death by 14%. Just let that sink in for a moment. This is a massive public health issue that's just hiding in plain sight. To really put this into perspective, scientists have found that chronic loneliness poses as big a risk to your long-term health as smoking cigarettes. Seriously. It's linked to high blood pressure, high cholesterol, a weaker immune system. We put huge warning labels on cigarette packs, right? Loneliness doesn't come with any warning at all. Failure is another one of those wounds that just messes with our heads. For example, there was this one study where 2 out of 3 toddlers just gave up on a super simple toy, either because they saw another kid fail or were just told they would. The only thing that was actually stopping them was their own mind tricking them into thinking they couldn't do it. And honestly, we adults fall for that exact same trick all the time. Okay, so we've laid out the problem. Now, what's the solution? This is where we get practical. Let's actually build our own emotional first aid kit, packed with scientifically proven techniques to start healing these wounds. So what's in the kit? Well, 3 really fundamental things. First, we need to actually pay attention when we're hurting emotionally. Acknowledge it instead of just pushing it away. Second, we have to actively protect our self-esteem. Think of it like our emotional immune system. And third, we've got to learn how to battle negative thinking before it spirals out of control. Now, to really get why protecting our self-esteem is so critical, listen to this story. A woman goes on her very first date after a really tough divorce. 10 minutes in, the guy just says, "Yeah, I'm not interested," and walks out. She's, of course, devastated. And what's the very first thing she says to herself? This incredibly cruel, awful thought. So think about what's going on here. Her self-esteem is already wounded from the rejection. So why on earth would she then make that wound even deeper? We'd never, ever do that to a physical cut, but we do it to our psychological injuries constantly. It's like a classic symptom of poor emotional hygiene. So what's the antidote? It's self-compassion. When your self-esteem is taking a hit, you have to be the one to revive it. Treat yourself the way you would treat a really good friend, with kindness and with support. This is probably the most important tool you can have in your emotional first aid kit. All right, section 4, rewiring your instincts. Now let's tackle one of the most common and honestly most destructive mental habits that we all have, getting stuck on negative thoughts. This habit has a name. It's called rumination. You know that feeling when you just can't stop replaying something upsetting, a fight you had, a comment from your boss, just over and over in your head? Well, that's it. And it is not harmless. This habit is a direct gateway to things like clinical depression, alcoholism, and even cardiovascular disease. But here's the good news. Studies show that you can break this urge. And all it takes is 2 minutes. Just 2 minutes of focused distraction. Concentrating on something else for literally 120 seconds is enough to break that negative cycle. It's such a simple but powerful fix. Winch actually used this exact technique himself when his twin brother was diagnosed with aggressive cancer. Every single time a worrying thought popped into his head, he forced himself to focus on something else for 2 minutes. He said within a week, his whole outlook became more positive, more hopeful. By taking these small, concrete actions, you're not just healing wounds, you are actively building emotional resilience. So what does all of this add up to? If we all started practicing a little emotional hygiene, what would the world even look like? Well, the potential is nothing short of revolutionary. I mean, think about this for a second. About 100 years ago, people started adopting basic personal hygiene. Things like washing their hands, brushing their teeth. And the result? Life expectancy shot up by over 50% in just a few decades. A massive, massive leap forward, all from simple preventative care. And that brings us to the final and most important question. If physical hygiene did that for how long we live, what could emotional hygiene do for our quality of life? Just imagine a world with less depression, less loneliness, a world where we're all more resilient, more empowered, and just more fulfilled. That is the world we can start building today, just by taking our emotional health as seriously as we take a common cold.